Mixed Doubles is the 6th episode of the 4th season of Frasier. This is directed by Jeff Melman, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts along the way. And I couldn't remember exactly what happened with this episode from the last time I watched it, and there was one moment that I found to be really delightful, and I will, of course, talk about that when we get there. It starts off with Frasier and Niles looking through a telescope to admire an armchair. And then Daphne comes home and she's upset because Joe has just broken up with her. They try and comfort her as best as they can, and then Roz comes over and helps to make things a little better by taking her out. Niles then decides that this is the time to tell Daphne how he feels about her. Because he's in a place where he's been separated from Maris for long enough. He's not really feeling very confident about that relationship anymore. And Daphne is now single. Frasier doesn't think it's a good idea, but Niles doesn't really care what Frasier thinks. And the next thing we see is Niles coming over to the apartment with a bunch of flowers. And actually, Martin's kind of supportive of Niles doing this. And he's very close to telling Daphne when the phone rings, and it's for Daphne. And it's somebody called Rodney. And Daphne explains that she met Rodney at the bar that Roz took her to, and she's going on a date with him, and Niles is obviously crushed. But he's determined to move on from things as best as he can. And then we have an intertitle card that says Where Everybody Knows Her Name, which as a Cheers fan, I rather loved. And actually, and I thought this was quite surprising, not the most surprising part of the episode, but Niles has actually gone to the singles bar to get some coaching on how to meet women from Roz. And it's a nice little scene. And he very quickly meets somebody. This is a woman called Adelle, played by Allison Mackie. And they seem to hit it off, and it seems to go quite well. We then cut to the apartment, and Frasier is staring at Eddie, and Eddie is not giving up. He is staring back at Frasier, and it's rather delightful. Adelle and Niles then come over, and Frasier offers them coffee in his Henry VIII wives' teacup set, which I think is fabulous. And then Daphne's date arrives. And this is the bit that I found to be fantastic. So funny. The casting is just incredible. The door opens and there stands Rodney, who is so much like Niles. It is fantastic. He's played by Kevin Farrell and it's just incredible. And we have this amazing moment between Martin and Frasier. We don't often see them agreeing or feeling the same way about situations, but they were both definitely finding this very amusing. We have this great moment where they're in the kitchen together and Niles comes through and doesn't immediately see that Rodney is a version of himself. But then Rodney comes through to ask about getting his milk steamed, and then the penny drops and Niles realises. And of course Niles realises not just that Rodney is like him, but that Daphne could potentially date somebody like him. And Frasier hands out the coffee, Niles is still in the kitchen, and Rodney is being really nice and polite, and he's saying it smells amazing, but not as amazing as Daphne's hair, and we hear the smashing of a cup in the kitchen, and Frasier calls out Anne Boleyn, to which we hear the reply, Catherine of Aragon, which I just thought was very funny and very, very well done. We then go down to Cafe Nervosa, and I feel like, I don't know why, but I feel like this was kind of predictable, but maybe I remembered this from the first time I watched the episode. I don't think I remembered it, but we see, well, while they're watching Frasier and Niles, we see Adelle coming in with Rodney. And I do think that was maybe predictable, but as I said, maybe I could remember it without remembering that I could remember it. And what I love most about this is that when Niles saw them, he wasn't annoyed at Adelle for cheating on him. He was annoyed at Rodney for treating Daphne like that, which I thought was so telling and so moving. And Frasier says to Niles, whatever you do, do not engage him in a physical fight. The whole thing would just look too weird. I love the line itself, but I love the delivery of the line. I thought it was fabulous. And then we see Niles going to the singles bar again, where he knew Daphne was, and we have this lovely moment between the two of them, and they're both talking about their situation and their having a really lovely heart-to-heart, and Daphne asks how the conversation would have went if they'd both met at the singles bar, if it had been a different time, and they play this out, and then they end by saying, Daphne says, I love you, Dr. Crane, and he replies, I love you too, Daphne, and it's a beautiful exchange of platonic love. Of course, we know for Niles it runs much deeper than that. Does it run deeper for Daphne? At this point, I think it's hard to tell. The fact that she still calls him Dr. Crane, obviously she does so out of respect, but it makes me wonder if she thinks that Dr. Crane, Niles, is somebody who would never go out with her, somebody who would never date her. And I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if she does believe that, or if she maybe just doesn't feel anything for Niles yet. I think it could go either way, arguably, at this point in the show. But I'll say no more on that for now. We then have the final scene where Martin is taking over from Frasier. Frasier is currently staring at Eddie once again. Eddie is not budging, and then Martin takes over, and Eddie pretty much immediately leaves the table, and Martin's facial expression was fabulous, and I rather enjoyed it. It's a very fun episode, very funny, with quite a few moments that I loved. Personal highlights, definitely the Catherine of Aragon moment, and Frasier saying the whole thing would just look too weird. But the whole episode is brilliant. Very, very well done. I don't think it would ever be a personal favourite episode, but that being said, Mixed Doubles is still pretty fantastic.